Cek 1, 2, 3. Cek. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning, everyone. Sampurasun. His Excellency, the Dean of Law Faculty of Pasundan University, Dr. Anton F. Susanto SHMH, the Honorable Criminal Law Coordinator, Gelda Tapiansari SHMH, the Honorable Speakers as Judge of the State Court of Bibb County, Shira Lewis and Russell Lewis, the Honorable Lecturers of Law Faculty of Pasundan University, the Honorable Representative of Student Organizations, Student Activity Units, and Communities of Law Faculty of Pasundan University, and the respectable all participants of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let us pray and praise to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because of His blessing and mercy, we can come together here without any obstacles and with healthy conditions in this general lecture. Second, let us greet and pray to our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who had brought us to the path of light and left the darkness in this life. Alright, to open this general lecture, let us start by saying Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, on this nice occasion, I am Falda Zaira Sidki as the Master of Ceremony of this event today. And now let me deliver the structure of this event today. First, welcoming speech from the Criminal Law Coordinator. Next, there will be a sharing session with the speakers from Judge Cyril Lewis and Russell Lewis. Then we get into the Q&A session. And to close this event, there will be souvenirs giving and a photo session. So, without any further ado, now we invite Gelda Tapiansari SHMH as the Criminal Law Coordinator. To Ms. Gelda, time and place are yours.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bapak Ibu, izinkan saya menyampaikan dan membaca sambutan dalam bahasa Inggris. Good morning everyone and welcome to the sharing session of Law and Ethics in United States of America with us, the Law Faculty of Pasundan University. I am as the head of Criminal Law Department and it gives me great pleasure to be here and I am representing our Dean of Law Faculty who is unable to attend this sharing session because he had activity agenda at the postgraduate program that he cannot live at this time. First of all, I would like to greet the Honorable first the lecturers of the Law Faculty of Pasundan University. Second, the student representatives from Law Faculty Student Organization. Third, Faculty Talent and Interest Unit. Fourth, student communities of Law Faculty. Fifth, our special guest, Honorable Judge Cheryl F. Lewis and Russell A. Lewis Sr. from the United States of America, and the last, our moderator and MC. Thank you for all of your presence in the sharing session today. Thank you for the cooperation from all the heads of department at Pasundan University and all parties who cannot be mentioned one by one so that this activity can be held very well. Ladies and gentlemen, this sharing session will relate to some courses which are penitentiary law, criminal law and jurisprudence, criminal procedure law, and ethics and professional law. This sharing session is expected to successfully increase the knowledge of students and lecturers of the legal studies program. In case of preventing the spread of COVID-19, we held this sharing session with hybrid method. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, on behalf of the Dean and Vice Dean of Law Faculty of Pasundan University, I am officially opening today's setting session. I apologize if there is an incorrect mention of the name and if there is an unpleasant greeting from us. We can carry out this activity casually, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis. Please enjoy the meals provided while doing the setting session. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I will give back the time to MC. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Ms. Gelda for a very warm welcoming remark. Ladies and gentlemen, now we come into the main session. That is the law sharing session, and the theme is Law and Ethics in United States of America, which will be delivered by Judge Lewis and Russell Lewis, and also will be moderated by one of our lecturers, Ms. Leni Widi Mulyani SHMH. To Ms. Leni, over to you.
Testes. Okay, thank you, Valda. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay. Sampurasun. Oke, semoga Ibu dan Bapak semuanya sehat, bahagia hari ini karena kita hari ini akan mendapatkan ilmu yang baru dari tamu kita di Amerika Serikat. Sebelumnya izinkan saya untuk membacakan CV dalam bahasa Indonesia. I will read your bio in our language, so people will know you better. Oke. Yang pertama adalah Ibu Judge Lewis, jadi beliau adalah hakim di Amerika Serikat. Beliau asli orang Georgia. Kemudian beliau sebelum mendaftar di Fakultas Hukum, kuliah di University of Georgia bagian bisnis. Jadi kalau di Amerika itu sebelum ke Fakultas Hukum masuk kuliah umum dulu, begitu baru mengambil Fakultas Hukum. Kemudian setelah itu beliau setelah lulus dari Fakultas Hukum, beliau kerja di Mercer. Setelah lulus, beliau bekerja di Greater Macon Chamber of Commerce dan di law firm. Setelah itu di tahun 2001 beliau bergabung di kantor kejaksaan. Jadi beliau dulu jaksa juga, Ibu dan Bapak. Nah, kemudian spesialitinya pada saat beliau menjadi jaksa adalah untuk kejahatan kerah putih dan penipuan begitu. Jadi spesialisasinya lebih kepada white collar crime. Kemudian pada saat beliau menjadi jaksa, beliau itu juga mengajar. Nah, mengajar biasanya kepada para penegak hukum yang lainnya mengenai apa itu white collar crime. Begitu supaya para penegak hukumnya yang lainnya juga lebih paham mengenai white collar crime. Kemudian di tahun 2019, Gubernur Brian Kemp itu menunjuk beliau menjadi court bench currently serve now. Jadi ditunjuk menjadi seperti ketua pengadilannya begitu di wilayah tersebut. Kemudian Judge Lewis ini hakim perempuan pertama itu ya yang ada di state court di Bibb County. Kemudian sekarang dia bagian dari Class of tahun 98 bagian dari Class of Leadership Macon and Serve Board Directors Middle of Georgia. Jadi pada sekarang ini beliau hanya aktif sebagai hakim saja karena tadi katanya sudah tidak diperkenankan lagi untuk mengajar, jadi harus berfokus pekerjaannya sebagai hakim. Kemudian yang kedua itu suaminya Pak Russell. Nah, Pak Russell Lewis ini juga tidak kalah hebatnya. Pak Russell Lewis ini dulunya polisi di Gary Police Department. Beliau bergabung sampai tahun 2000, kemudian juga tahun 84 juga menerima Purple Heart for Gunshot. Wow. Jadi Purple Heart ini adalah penghargaan dari pemerintah seperti layaknya orang ini adalah pahlawan, begitu ya. Nah, terus kemudian he recovered. Jadi beliau kena luka tembak itu pada saat melakukan tugasnya. Kemudian beliau bergabung menjadi anggota SWAT. Ini kalau teman-teman suka nonton film Amerika nih, SWAT-nya yang polisi pakai kayak Densus 88 lah gitu ya. Nah, beliau dulu bergabung dengan tim SWAT. Kemudian tahun 2001 beliau juga menjadi Chief of Investigator, ya, from newly created Office for the Child Advocates, where he remained until 2008. Jadi konsentrasinya juga untuk masalah pidana anak, begitu ya. Kemudian sekarang ini setelah pensiun di tahun 2020, Gubernur dari Georgia menunjuk beliau untuk menjadi anggota Dewan Khusus untuk Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, gitu. Jadi beliau menjadi anggota dewan untuk masalah-masalah pidana. Nah, itu saja mungkin CV yang saya bacakan. So the one who will speak and present will be you, Judge Russell, and then Pak Russell will be asked if you have any questions and everything you want to ask about the police or something like related with law enforcement, you also can ask. So we have like 30 minutes for you to present. Untuk Ibu dan Bapak dan teman-teman yang ada di online, jadi ini situasinya will be like relaxed, not like very formal like in the class, so people will join your sessions. Okay, Judge Rels, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I move around a lot, so if I could get my slideshow up, please. Okay, I want to talk to you today about law and ethics, but before I do that, I want to thank the Dean and the faculty for having my husband and I here today. We are so excited to be here. Okay. Oh, it's off. I'll turn it on. There we go. I want to start by giving just a little background about how our government and justice system is set up in America. A lot of it's very similar to Indonesia, but there's a few differences. So I wanted to sort of set the table of my playground before we talk about yours. Our federal government is divided into 3 branches. We have the legislative branch, which makes the laws, the executive branch, which is charged with enforcing the laws, and then the judicial branch, which is charged with interpreting the laws and making sure that they comply with our federal Constitution. Okay, our federal judiciary is divided into 3 levels of courts. Our trial courts hear the cases. We use a jury system rather than 3 judges. So they hear the case, and if at the end of the case one of the sides is unsatisfied with how it turned out, then they can appeal it to the Court of Appeals. Each region in the country is divided into different circuits, and those circuits hear the appeals. When they issue a ruling, their ruling applies not just to the case, but is binding law for their circuit. It's persuasive. In other words, this might be a good idea for the other circuits, but they're not bound by it. They don't have to do it. Then the United States Supreme Court hears appeals from the Court of Appeals. They get to decide which cases they will hear and which cases they will not hear. So they get to choose what they want to rule on. And their decisions are binding for all of America. Now, each state has its own state government that is also divided into 3 branches. If you'll look, my state, Georgia, is in the southeast. It's the red state on the map. That's where I live. So in Georgia, we have a state Supreme Court, a state Court of Appeals, and the trial courts. My office is in that brick building on the 5th floor on the little corner. That's where I work. That's my office. I hear civil cases and misdemeanor criminal cases. So I have juries, or they can choose to have just the one judge hear the case. In that case, I hear the evidence and I make a ruling. When there's a jury trial, the jury decides the case and then I would enter a judgment. If they are not satisfied with the outcome in my case, then it goes to the Court of Appeals. Our Court of Appeals in Georgia has 15 judges, and they're divided into 3 judge panels. And each of those three judge panels hears cases assigned to them. The 3 judges collaborate and decide their ruling. Then their ruling is binding for the whole state from now on, unless the Supreme Court decides to hear it. And just like in the federal Supreme Court, the Supreme Court can decide which cases it wants to hear, yes or no. The only exception to that is if someone is convicted of murder, killing someone, their cases don't go to the Court of Appeals, they go straight to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will hear their appeal. So that's the only type of case that has an automatic guarantee that the Supreme Court will hear it. This is Georgia. The little red, that's Bibb County. So that's where I work. So that gives you an idea. I'm in a southern state, in the middle of that state in Southeast America. So there's some similarities and differences to how we handle our trials. My understanding, and I could be wrong, and I'm sure Ibulini will tell me if I am, is you don't have jury trials. We do have jury trials. There's some good things and some bad things about having jury trials, and we'll talk about those throughout the morning. And our appellate rulings are binding on us. So if an appellate court hears a case from another county and they make a ruling, then I have to follow that ruling from now on. In America, we have what we call the rule of law. That means the law is the most important thing. It's more important than who the people are, whether they're rich or poor, whether they're a business or an individual. The law is the supreme thing that I'm worried about. That is my guiding force, is whatever the law is. Because we have juries, we have, and jurors are just common, ordinary citizens that get a summons to come to court. They may have no background whatsoever in the type of case they're going to hear or in any experience with the law. So we have rules of evidence so that they don't hear things that are not relevant. Relevance is a huge term for us in trial practice in America. Before either of the attorneys can introduce any evidence, they have to establish to the judge, and that's my job, is to decide what is relevant. If someone is charged with stealing, is it relevant that 5 years ago they beat somebody up? Does that have anything to do with the fact of whether or not they stole something on this particular date? And the answer in America would be no. That's not relative. You don't want to introduce evidence that will make the jury think, oh, well, this is a bad person, so he must be guilty. Or, oh, he seems like he's a good person. He must be innocent. We focus just on the specific incident that's the subject matter of the litigation. And there's also rules of procedure. Procedure is how you go about presenting your evidence at trial. And so we have many motions where one side may file a motion, a legal brief, to say, the other side wants to talk about this. We don't want that to come in. So before the trial, I will have a hearing and determine whether or not I'm going to allow that in, or whether the other side has followed the proper procedure for getting that evidence admitted into trial. I've put up on this slide a figure. We call her Lady Justice. And in America, we have a saying that justice is blind. If you'll notice, she's wearing a blindfold, a scarf across her eyes, because justice is not supposed to look at, oh, he's a rich person, so he's going to get what he wants, or he's a poor person, so we're not going to care or do what he wants. Justice is blind. I'm not supposed to look at those things. I'm just supposed to look at the case. And then Lady Justice also has a sword, and we call it the sword of justice, which is wielded to strike down people who are unjust or who have done unjust things, and defend people who are victims or who have been wronged. And finally, Lady Justice is holding scales. And we call those the scales of justice, because all people who come before the court are equal. And we, in hearing the case, at the beginning of the trial, both the scales are perfectly balanced. They're equal. And then the evidence comes, and the scales begin to tip. And they may go back and forth throughout the course of the trial, but at the end of the trial, the jury then takes that evidence and looks which way did the evidence lean, and that's how they make a decision as to which side they're going to rule for. In America, prosecutors and law enforcement work together, but they have very different roles. Law enforcement, or the police, are generally the first responders. They are the ones that, when something bad happens, are the first ones on the scene. They open the case, they begin collecting evidence, they investigate, they talk to people, they collect physical evidence, take photographs, and make a decision whether or not they have enough evidence to arrest someone. Now, sometimes they will have to come see me and satisfy me or another judge that they have enough evidence so that I will then sign a warrant so that they can arrest that person. We have to have probable cause in America before somebody can be arrested. And once they find that probable cause and arrest that person, they turn their case file over to the prosecutor. And from there, the prosecutor reviews the evidence and decides which laws to charge and which charges to bring against the defendant. Sometimes, because most police officers haven't been to law school and studied law, so they may only charge one crime. But then when the prosecutor reviews the evidence, they see, oh, wait a minute, there's many other crimes, or it wasn't this crime, it was another crime. Anyway, they have what we call charging authority. They bring the charges. And then once they bring the charges, they file either an indictment or an accusation. At the federal level, it's called an information, which is the formal and official charging document that says the government is bringing a criminal charge against someone. They bring that charge, and then it's set down to go through the motions to get to trial. Now, the law enforcement officer is still very much involved in that because since they were the first one on the scene, they are a witness for the state, for the government. So they may be called to testify or give evidence at trial. But it's the prosecutor who decides who will come to trial and give testimony and who maybe isn't so important. So those are the roles. Just anecdotally, or as a side story, that photograph a colleague took, that was my very first day on the bench and the first case that I heard. So in America, we don't do a lot of photographs in the courtroom for just routine matters, but they snuck their phone in and took that picture and gave it to me as a memento of my very first thing I did from the bench. So now let's talk about ethics a little bit in America. Every level, law enforcement, prosecutors, and other attorneys and judges have codes of ethics, written down rules of what we are and are not allowed to do. And we have governing bodies that supervise us and make sure that we follow those rules. And if we don't follow those rules, they are in charge of disciplining us. First, let me talk about the police officers. Police officers, whether they are working for a tiny little town that has 3 police officers, or whether they are working for the state, they have to be certified. In Georgia, we call it the Peace Officers Standards and Training Council, or POST. They have to be POST certified. And that is several months of class. They have to pass the test. They have to pass a physical test. They have to pass a firearms test. And then they study many categories of the criminal law, and they have to pass all of those. And if at any phase they don't pass, then they are kicked out and they either have to start over or choose a different job. So once they pass that and become certified as a police officer, they take an oath. And part of their oath of office is that they will support and enforce the laws, and that they will not take any money that's not paid to them in their paycheck. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So once they have taken their oath and they begin working as a police officer, they have to every year get more education. They have to get so many education hours to keep their certification. Lawyers are much the same. In America, you go to university for 4 years, get a university degree, then you go to law school. Law school is 3 years. And then after law school, you take a 2-day exam called the bar exam. And if you pass the bar exam, and you also have to, at that point, have a background check. And certain people have to vouch for your character, your integrity, and your work ethic. And if you get those recommendations and you pass your background check, you are admitted as an attorney, and you take an oath. All lawyers take an oath, and the oath that all lawyers take is to abide by the code of ethics and act fairly and to obey the law. Prosecutors, lawyers for the government, take an additional oath, and they have to protect the Constitution, uphold the laws, and they it's very difficult to explain to other cultures, but a prosecutor isn't trying to win their case. A prosecutor is trying to seek justice. So a prosecutor has an ethical obligation if they get a case from a law enforcement officer, and through preparing for trial, they see that maybe this person isn't guilty, they have an ethical obligation to drop the case. They also, at trial, have to present their evidence, but have an affirmative duty to protect the constitutional rights of their defendant. So it's a little strange that as a prosecutor, you not only are fighting for your side, but you also have to look out for the other side as well. If you don't do these things, either as a lawyer or as a prosecutor, if somebody thinks you've done something wrong as an attorney, they contact the State Bar of Georgia and file a complaint. Anybody can file a complaint with Post or the Bar Association. And lawyers can be disciplined or what we call disbarred. Disbarred means that you lose your license to practice law. Now, judges have to take the same oath. That's the governor of Georgia giving me my oath of office. And when I take my oath, I put my hand on my holy book. My husband was holding it for me. And take my oath of office. Judges have to be lawyers. You have to have practiced for several years before you can become a lawyer. There's a judicial nominating commission that has a huge application that you have to fill out. And they do a background check. They ask the members of the bar what your ethics and standards are. And if the other lawyers say this person does not have good ethics or good character, you can't be a judge. And then after you pass all that, you get sworn in, and then I have to run for election every 4 years. So there is also a governing body for me called the Judicial Qualifications Commission. Judges, I have to hold up all of those laws and rules that attorneys have to hold up, plus I have other rules. And they're mostly rules of don't. I cannot be involved in politics anymore. As a lawyer, I could support this candidate or, speak out against another candidate, but now I have to remain silent. I cannot talk about politics or comment on public issues publicly because I have to be neutral. I have to be impartial. And anybody, if they feel like I've broken one of these rules, can file a complaint with the JQC and can have me disciplined or removed from office. Thank you for your time and attention.
Test. Okay, so please give her a big applause, everyone, for her presentation. Allow me to explain in bahasa to summary your presentation. Ibu dan Bapak semuanya dan teman-teman yang ada di online, jadi sebetulnya untuk secara sistem tidak terlalu banyak perbedaan dengan Indonesia. Nah, Amerika itu kan common law system, sementara Indonesia civil law system. Ada beberapa perbedaan yang sangat menonjol, yaitu yang pertama tidak ada jury system. Kalau di Indonesia itu tidak ada juri sistem, kalau di Amerika ada juri. Nah, kemudian biasanya di Amerika itu hakimnya satu gitu. Jadi dalam mengadili itu hakimnya satu, sementara kalau di Indonesia itu majelis hakimnya. Nah, kemudian untuk Judicial sendiri, beliau menangani kasus-kasus perdata dan kasus-kasus misdemeanor. Misdemeanor itu artinya tindak pidana ringan, gitu ya. Jadi di pengadilan tingkat pertama, begitu. Nah, terus kemudian tapi ada beberapa kasus gitu kan, kalau kita di Indonesia ini harus mengikuti misalnya langsung ke pengadilan negeri, tapi ada beberapa kasus yang misalnya dianggap itu berat, itu langsung ke Mahkamah Agung kasusnya. Jadi nanti hakim di Mahkamah Agung yang langsung menghandle kasus tersebut. Kemudian di sini di Amerika Serikat itu ada yang disebut dengan rules of law, kemudian di dalamnya ada rule of evidence. Nah, berbeda dengan sistem di Indonesia, di common law system atau di Amerika Serikat, sebelum masuk ke persidangan yang sesungguhnya, jadi ada hearing. Hearing itu semacam pra persidangannya gitu. Apakah kasus ini layak untuk maju ke pengadilan yang sebenarnya atau tidak gitu. Nah, ini adalah tugas kedua belah pihak antara jaksa dengan penasihat hukum untuk bukan untuk membuktikan ya, untuk memberikan bukti apakah bukti saya itu cukup kuat untuk dibawa atau tidak. Kalau misalnya buktinya itu kurang cukup kuat, berarti stop sampai situ. Tapi ketika buktinya cukup kuat, maka akan ke pengadilan yang selanjutnya. Nah, kalau di Indonesia langsung gitu ya ke pengadilan negeri. Kemudian bukti itu harus relevan. Bukti itu harus relevan. Jadi masa lalu si tersangka atau terdakwa itu sebetulnya tidak dapat dijadikan sebagai bukti. Kalau misalnya tadi kejahatan itu pencurian, tapi sekitar 4 tahun yang lalu dia misalnya memukuli orang, ini kan tidak relevan. Jadi masa lalu seseorang itu tidak dapat dijadikan sebagai dasar bukti. Apalagi misalnya karakter seseorang tidak bisa. Jadi hanya evidence yang bicara, bukti yang bicara apakah dia layak untuk masuk ke pengadilan atau tidak. Kemudian di sini juga ada tadi bukti itu masuk ke dalam rules of procedures ya. Kemudian di sini ada tadi Judicial menjelaskan tentang Lady Justice gitu ya. Nah, si Lady Justice itu ada beberapa kode-kode gitu. Tadi kan matanya ditutup, artinya kita tidak boleh sebagai hakim tidak boleh melihat si miskin dan si kaya, semuanya harus adil. Kemudian pedang tadi, nah pedang itu artinya untuk menumpas segala bentuk ketidakadilan. Kemudian tadi timbangan gitu ya, jadi timbangan itu semua orang harus diperlakukan sama gitu ya. Kemudian di sini pada saat tadi sama dengan Indonesia, yang menangkap orang itu adalah polisi. Bukan jaksa. Nah, polisi di sini sebelum dia menangkap orang atau melakukan penggeledahan itu harus mendapatkan surat penggeledahan atau surat perintah penangkapan dari hakim. Karena kalau dia tidak membuktikan warrant disebutnya, maka penggeledahannya atau penangkapannya itu tidak sah, begitu ya. Nah, setelah warrant itu dikeluarkan, kemudian polisi menangkap orang, menggeledah, kemudian nanti orang itu akan dibawa, diproses dan langsung dibawa ke kejaksaan. Nanti jaksa yang memeriksa apakah evidence yang dibawa oleh polisi itu cukup kuat atau tidak. Karena nanti yang ke pengadilan itu jaksa bukan polisi. Nah, ketika menurut jaksa itu kurang cukup kuat, maka dikembalikan lagi ke polisi. Ini harus kuat nih evidence-nya, kalau tidak orang ini tidak akan lepas. Nah, maaf, orangnya akan lepas. Nah, karena katanya kadang-kadang polisi hanya satu tuduhan saja gitu. Nah, khawatirnya kalau satu tuduhan saja tanpa bukti yang kuat, ini akan lepas. Nah, kemudian setiap level penegak hukum itu ada tahapannya, gitu kan ya. Yang pertama polisi. Nah, polisi itu harus disumpah, teman-teman, ya. Polisi itu harus disumpah, mereka masuk ke dalam seperti akademi kepolisian gitu ya. Kemudian ada trainingnya di situ selama beberapa bulan secara fisik, kemudian cara penggunaan senjata, kemudian belajar tentang kategori-kategori hukum pidana gitu ya. Nah, setelah itu mereka harus lulus tes. Kalau tidak lulus tes berarti mereka tidak jadi polisinya, gitu kan. Kalau sudah lulus tes nanti mereka disumpah dan mendapatkan sertifikat. Nah, sertifikat itu teman-teman harus setiap tahun itu harus dipertahankan dengan mengikuti pendidikan. Gitu. Itu setiap tahun, karena kalau polisi tidak bersertifikat, dia tidak akan dianggap sebagai polisi, begitu. Jadi tidak layak maksudnya. Kemudian kalau lawyer nih untuk pengacara. Sebetulnya untuk lawyer di Indonesia lebih gampang untuk menjadi lawyer di Indonesia daripada di Amerika. Karena kalau menjadi lawyer di Amerika harus 4 tahun dulu kuliah subjek umum begitu. Terus kemudian setelah lulus baru kuliah hukumnya 3 tahun. Baru kemudian nanti setelah lulus kuliah hukum dia bar association. Jadi bar association itu seperti Peradi atau AAI atau dewan pengacara yang lainnya begitu ya. Nah, mereka harus lulus itu dan mereka harus disumpah gitu ya. Harus disumpah. Kemudian sumpahnya itu di dalamnya itu adalah mereka harus berintegritas, harus mengikuti code of ethic, harus mengikuti hukum, harus mengikuti work ethic yang bagus gitu. Nanti kalau tidak, bar association-nya ini akan mencabut sertifikatnya. Gitu ya. Kemudian yang hakim juga disumpah gitu ya. Hakim juga disumpah, kemudian jaksa juga harus disumpah. Nah, ini yang menarik di sini adalah kode etiknya jaksa gitu ya. Sebetulnya bukan untuk bagaimana memenangkan kasus, tapi lebih kepada bagaimana mencari keadilan. Jadi itu yang harus ditanamkan di jaksa katanya begitu ya. Nah, kemudian untuk hakim mereka harus disumpah, kemudian di dalamnya itu hakim itu harus punya good character. Jadi karakternya harus bagus ya, jangan mau disuap begitu ya, jangan mau korupsi dan lain sebagainya. Karena kalau ketahuan tentunya nanti akan dicabut itu sertifikatnya, dan setiap 4 tahun sekali Judicial juga harus merenew lagi sertifikatnya. Nah, itu kesimpulan dari penjelasan dari Judicial. Nah, sementara untuk Pak Russell sendiri, can I have questions, Pak Russell? Yes, yeah. I want to ask you questions. Oke, Pak Russell ini dulu bekerja sebagai polisi, gitu ya. Mari kita tanya ya, apa yang boleh dan tidak boleh dilakukan pada saat beliau jadi polisi, gitu ya. So while you work as a police officers, what is the do's and don'ts while you work as a police officers?
Well, there are actually a lot of do's and don'ts. You have to, at the local level, there are policies and procedures that you have to follow for your agency, and each agency has policy and procedures, whether you're at the local level, the county level, or the state level. So you have to follow those rules. In addition to those rules, you have to follow state law and federal law, because there are things you can get involved in where not only you can get in trouble criminally, but you can be sued civilly. You can lose your house and impact your family. So it's very important that for law enforcement officers, you do the right thing at the right time. And it's sometimes very difficult because situations can present themselves very quickly, and you have to make decisions very quickly. And you have a matter of seconds sometimes to decide what are you going to do. So the do's and don'ts based on law and policies and procedures in the training that occurs. So the training for law enforcement, how you use your equipment, whether it's your car, your weapon, restraint devices, tasers, whatever it may be, you resort to that training, you do it over and over again so it becomes natural. So that when you get in a situation where your adrenaline, the excitement of what's happening takes over, you revert to your training and you sometimes do things without thinking.
Menurut Pak Russell, untuk polisi itu harus mengikuti semua aturan di level apapun. Jadi kalau di Amerika itu ada level state, ada level federal gitu kan ya, ada level county, semuanya harus diikuti aturannya. Nah, kemudian karena trainingnya ini per tahun, begitu ya, ada latihannya per tahun, jadi sudah terbiasa bagaimana untuk menghandle situasi. Cuman ada kalanya, kadang-kadang ada beberapa kejadian tertentu yang kadang-kadang membuat emosi begitu. Nah, kalau sudah emosi harus diingatkan lagi. Oh iya, saya ini polisi, saya itu harus mengikuti aturan. Karena kalau tidak, teman-teman, sanksinya lumayan cukup berat. Sanksinya itu tidak hanya sanksi pidana, juga sanksi perdata. Gitu. Tadi contohnya bisa saja polisi ini bisa kehilangan rumahnya gitu, bisa kehilangan hak-hak secara keperdataan jika mereka melanggar aturan.
Lenny, may I add that, the mantra for law enforcement is to serve and protect the citizens to which you work for. So that is an overriding feature. Am I doing good for what I'm working for?
It's the same mantra here also. Jadi mantranya katanya to serve and protect, ya, untuk melayani dan melindungi, sama dengan polisi kita di sini ya. Okay, so can you explain to us what is SWAT? So is that true that SWAT is like I saw on television?
Well, let me first say that anything you see on television is over-sensationalized. They do it for entertainment, not necessarily for the reality of what occurs on the street. Each agency will have a special unit, and it's called many things. It can be SWAT, which is Special Weapons and Tactics, or it could be a CS unit, which is Crime Support Unit, where those officers receive additional training in how to handle high-risk situations, whether you have a known bad criminal who maybe have robbed a lot of banks or may have done harm to a number of people, where you have the regular patrol officers who mainly handle the routine calls or answering calls for service, whether it's burglaries, breaking into cars and things like that. The SWAT team would have more equipment, more protection for yourselves, and more available in a bigger group. Safety in numbers. There may be 10 SWAT officers that may serve a high-risk warrant on a criminal that's held in a house. So we get extra training on how to get in, get the subject we're looking for, and how to get out without anybody getting hurt. So there's just an extra level. There's more qualifications. You have to shoot a higher score. You have to be more physically fit. When I say shoot a higher score with your weapons and be more physically fit than maybe your average patrol officer is. So yes, we have that, but on television, Hollywood makes it look a lot more glamorous than it actually is. Yes, way cooler.
Jadi SWAT ini tim khusus dari kepolisian gitu. Jadi mereka ada training khusus lagi gitu untuk mengikuti SWAT ini. Trainingnya adalah misalnya fisik, training secara fisik, kemudian training bagaimana penggunaan senjata gitu, karena mereka ditugaskan untuk menangani kasus-kasus yang khusus. Nah, biasanya satu squad itu ada 10 orang kepolisian. Tidak semua polisi bisa menjadi bagian dari tim ini. Jadi harus lulus kualifikasi begitu kalau SWAT ini. And the last question for Pak Russell, can you explain about the Purple Heart? What is the Purple Heart?
Well, I was awarded a Purple Heart because I was injured in the line of duty. On a domestic call, I was actually shot while performing my duties trying to protect a lady who had been beaten up by her boyfriend. So we had answered a call at another location, and I wanted to make sure that she got home safely. So I followed her to another location, and when we drove up into the parking lot, her boyfriend was waiting for us there, and when we pulled up, he opened fire. So I was shot in the leg during that time. So I was given a Purple Heart for being injured in a medal. It's a medal that goes on your chest for being injured in the line of duty.
Okay, very nice of you. Jadi Purple Heart ini adalah penghargaan dari pemerintah karena beliau waktu itu ada kasus ada perempuan yang disiksa oleh pacarnya, terus kemudian dia mencoba untuk menyelamatkan perempuan itu, terus kemudian begitu membuka mobil jadi pacarnya ada di situ dan Pak Russell terkena tembakan untuk melindungi si perempuan ini gitu. Nah, karena beliau mendapatkan tembakan in the line of duty pada saat tugas, maka beliau mendapatkan penghargaan Purple Heart ini. Oke, untuk teman-teman di auditorium atau di online, ada yang ingin ditanyakan? Oke, silakan Pak Subelo.
Thanks, Mr. Russell, Mr. Cheryl. You have come in our campus and sharing here, but I'm sorry I will give a question in Indonesia. Yang pertama tentu saja sangat berbeda antara United States dan Indonesia. Indonesia baru merdeka 1945, Amerika sudah 1776. Rentang waktu yang begitu lama membuat Indonesia terlihat masih banyak kekurangan dalam segala hal. Kalau Pak Russell tadi bercerita bagaimana prosedur dan Mr. Cheryl tadi juga cerita bagaimana aturan-aturan harus ditegakkan. Di sana saya membayangkan biaya dan segala sesuatunya sudah disediakan. Di Indonesia di tingkat kecamatan tuh seringkali kami berbicara dengan teman-teman polisi, mereka tidak punya biaya operasional. Tidak hanya itu Pak Russell, ada militer di Indonesia. Jadi di tingkat kecamatan tuh kalau saya dapat cerita dari teman-teman, bisa jadi acara pesta ya gampangnya perti oleh militer, tapi yang membiayai harus polisi. Dan polisi nanti cari dana dari masyarakat. Tapi nanti kalau di media, di wartawan, di publikasi, itu yang dijelek-jelekan pasti polisi. Jadi sangat rumit di Indonesia itu kasusnya itu. 2016, kalau Pak Russell terbang ke Sumatera Utara itu sekitar 4 jam perjalanan pesawat, itu masih terjadi pembakaran tempat ibadah. Itu hanya karena seorang nenek-nenek yang mengomentari suara adzan dari satu tempat ibadah ya, pengeras yang terlalu noisy ya. Beberapa jam dari Bandung kalau kita perjalanan darat di daerah Sukabumi itu beberapa waktu yang lalu masih terjadi penyerangan tempat ibadah.
Bapak maaf, boleh langsung ke pertanyaan?
Ya, pertanyaan saya dengan situasi Indonesia yang complicated itu, kira-kira Amerika yang sudah punya pengalaman lebih panjang ya dalam proses penegakan hukum dan tentunya pencapaian tujuan hukum, nasihat Pak Russell, Bu Cheryl apa untuk kami ya? Kan ini banyak mahasiswa yang hampir lulus ini, mereka masa depan Indonesia. Apa yang harus ditanamkan di benak para mahasiswa? Apa yang harus ditanamkan di benak kami untuk menciptakan hukum yang benar-benar manusiawi ya? Ya tentu saja Indonesia punya cita-cita juga untuk berkontribusi bagi keamanan dan ketertiban Indonesia. Terima kasih atas waktunya.
Okay, thank you. So one by one, right? Just in case that we forget about the question. So he basically explained about the situation in Indonesia compared with America. Of course that your country is way progressive than ours, since that our independence also, your independence much longer than ours. And of course, speaking about the police, so in Indonesian police department, we still have lack of everything in every situation. And we have so many cases dealing with the misdemeanors cases, and some of the people will criminalize the police itself. So basically his question is that from both of you, do you have any suggestions for us as lecturers or for the students out there, how to create a better law system?
You want to take that, Your Honor?
I think the first thing to understand is that no system is perfect. And that wherever you are in the world, if you go out and serve and protect, you see the worst of the worst. And you literally do protect other people from having to see that because you're the one that goes out and answers the call. I've spent many years before I became a judge teaching police officers, both new, trying to get certified, and then officers who had done it for a long time. It's a difficult job, and I think everywhere they're not appreciated the way they should be, because people don't know what it is they actually see every day. I think education, sharing information is vital. I recently attended a forum in a poor neighborhood in my jurisdiction, and police were informing them of some of the services that were available and things that they could do to help that people didn't know about because they see things on TV or they watch the news and it's very sad. Only the bad things police officers do make the news and not the good things police officers do. America is not perfect and never will be. But I really truly believe that education and communication will help build understanding.
I would just add to that the people, the serve and protect mantra is very important, and because you have to know that you're serving the people that you're policing, and that both good and bad, to protect the innocent, the young, the old, people who can't defend themselves. So it has to be a community effort in order to get that done. Your leaders have to be involved. They have to want what's best for the community. The law enforcement officers who are serving in your community have to want what's best. But every person that's involved in the situation may not be every person that needs to be involved in the situation, in that profession. Sometimes you have people who get involved who don't have the right attitude or the right mindset to do the job that they've been tasked to do. So those people have to be identified through things that occur and weeded out, for lack of a better word, to do that, so that you have the right people doing the right things and serving the community, and that has to come first.
And just one more. Indonesia is a young country, and America, not an old country, but certainly older than Indonesia. You guys have come so far in such a short period of time. You are way further at your age than we were at your age. So keep trying. It's going to get better.
It takes time.
Iya, begitu Pak ya. Jadi teman-teman katanya tidak ada sistem yang sempurna karena kan masing-masing sistem juga kita disesuaikan dengan kebutuhan kita masing-masing ya. Tapi kata Judicial yang penting itu adalah education tuh teman-teman ya. Jadi kuliahnya harus benar gitu ya, terus kemudian sharing, kemudian cari informasi supaya kita juga menjadi orang yang lebih baik. Kemudian kalau untuk kepolisian sendiri, sepanjang dia ingat mantranya bahwa mereka itu harus serve and protect, itu tidak akan menjadi masalah. Oke, untuk yang online, sebelum saya ke chat, ada yang berani nggak untuk bertanya secara langsung? Coba siapa tuh yang langsung? Adi Maulana. Okay.
Yeah.
Adi.
Okay, so hi. Beforehand, I would like to say thank you to Judge Cheryl and Judge Russell and also Miss Lenny to have this sharing session. And let me introduce myself. My name is Adi Maulana and I'm a 7th semester student. So as we seen and heard earlier, that we do have differences between our legal system, civil law legal system and common law legal system. One of the differences is we do have 3 judges, not only one like American court. So, and also we do not have jury trials. So I have 2 questions. The questions heard simple, but I think most of us would also curious to know. The first question is, how important or how huge jury decision to affect judge sentence? And also the second question is, can judge put a sentence without jury decisions? That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adi. Please, Judge.
All right. In a criminal case, the jury has the final say of guilty or innocent. So, and I'm listening to the evidence with the jury. And if I hear a case and I would have said guilty, but the jury says not guilty, that person is free. It's over. And the same, if I hear a case and I feel like the person was not guilty, but the jury says guilty, in that case, under certain circumstances, I can set aside the jury's verdict. But it's very, very, very rare. But then I'm the one that does the sentence, you know, how much punishment they're going to get.
Okay. The second one is how important jury decisions.
Well, on the criminal side, they're final. On the civil side, it's more common for the judge to step in and overrule the jury. It's called a judgment notwithstanding the verdict. In other words, a judgment against the verdict. And there's a test, there's certain things that have to be met before I can do it. It's not as rare as doing it on the criminal side, but it is, it's still pretty rare. What usually happens is the jury, if you two are suing each other and the jury finds in your favor and says, we're going to give you so much money, and it's ridiculous, the judge will usually lower the money, but not make you lose, but just lower the money.
Okay.
And that happens every once in a while, but not often.
Oke, Adi sudah cukup jelas jawabannya, Di?
Ya, sudah cukup
Oke.
jelas.
Untuk lebih adil ya, saya lihat coba di kolom chat. Adakah yang bertanya? Coba Pak Budi, punten, chat yang pertama, yang paling pertama yang nulis, oke. Karena yang pertama nulis yang bertanya mungkin ya. Oke. Oke, so mungkin boleh yang, yes, boleh yang ini, oke, yang ya salah satu aja. Nah yang ini, good morning, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Elvira Valentin. I'm from penitentiary class, and I want to apologize because I couldn't open my camera. And then the question is that how does the election system of judges work in the U.S.? How are judges of the Supreme Court appointed, and what are the methods being used?
Okay. That's a lot of questions. I'm going to start with the easiest one first. Supreme Court justices of the United States are appointed by the president, and it's a lifetime appointment.
Wow.
So that's why whenever we have a justice that retires or dies, it's very, very political, because whoever the president is, you know, and his party, you know, they get to make the nomination. but the nomination has to be approved by the United States Senate. So if the president is one party and the Senate is another, it can get messy. But if you're on the United States Supreme Court, you're there for life. And the reason that they do that at that level, that's the most important court in our country. So they never have to run for election. They never have to get another appointment. So they do what they feel in their heart and don't have to worry about, oh, well, this guy appointed me, so I need to do what he wants, or this guy is helping me with my election, so I need to do what he wants. So that's the Supreme Court. Judges, our state Supreme Court in Georgia has to run for election every 6 years. The Court of Appeals has to run every 4 years, and trial judges have to run every 4 years. I just had to run for election this spring. No one ran against me, so that's the best kind of election where there's no opponent. So you go in, you vote for yourself, and you win. And most judicial elections are uncontested. Every once in a while, we'll have somebody run against a judge. But because judges have to follow so many rules, if they're doing that, then they don't get too much controversy, so people don't want to run against them. So, and I'm trying to be that kind of judge where I will do the right thing and not be bad so that people won't want to run against me. Our elections for judges are set up earlier than the people running for president or governor or whatever. And the election cycle is shorter, so it's easier to stay in office if you're doing what you're supposed to. Oh, and it's also a judge. In America, we have two big parties, Democrat and Republican. Judge, it doesn't matter how I vote or whatever, it's nonpartisan. I'm on the ballot not as a Republican or not as a Democrat, but judge. Okay. Because judge has to be neutral.
Oke, mudah-mudahan jelas ya. Jadi kalau untuk hakim Mahkamah Agung itu dipilih langsung oleh presiden dan itu sekali seumur hidup begitu. Jadi tidak ada lagi pemilihan lagi. Nah, jadi kalau misalnya itu sampai hakim tersebut meninggal begitu. Terus kemudian tapi ketika nanti presidennya berganti, nah ini lebih kepada pendekatan politis gitu. Nah, sementara hakim-hakim yang di bawahnya mereka harus berkampanye lagi nih gitu ya untuk 4 tahun ke depan gitu. Jadi mereka juga harus mempertahankan posisinya. Nah, tapi kalau misalnya ada kampanye-kampanye politik, mereka harus netral. Jadi tidak boleh memilih salah satu partai. Nah, untuk pertanyaan selanjutnya silakan Ibu Hesti. Jadi teman-teman kita dibagi supaya adil ya, setelah di ruangan, kemudian di video, kemudian di chat gitu ya. Okay, silakan Ibu.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two questions. I will address my question first. My first question to Judge Lewis. You mentioned earlier that judges in America can choose whatever case they want to rule. Can you elaborate more about that? Because here in Indonesia, the judges cannot deny or cannot refuse to preside hearing a case. That's for Judge Lewis and for Mr. Lewis. What is your opinion? Or we would like to know about your opinion on the racial cases of George Floyd, for example, that was viral, and also the hate against the Asian because in the George Floyd case, some police officers were involved. And this might not be relevant. My father was served in army, and he went to Georgia for an army training camp. She went to Fort Garden, I think. Yeah, that might be not relevant. No, thank you.
All right. The only court that gets to choose which case is the Supreme Court. The trial courts have to take all the cases that come to them, and the Court of Appeals has to take the cases that come to them. So it's just the Supreme Court. And what they're looking for, because if they look and feel like the Court of Appeals got it right, or it's a small issue, they'll just let the Court of Appeals ruling stand. So they only want to hear cases that are of that deal with the Constitution or deal with matters that haven't been ruled on before. So, but I don't get to choose, only the Supreme Court. So.
In regards to your question, for me, as I said earlier, there are all kinds of rules and regulations that police officers have to abide by. And really, when you look at it in our society, police officers, everyone in society has rules and regulations. You do, I do. But police officers are held to a higher standard in doing that, because we have the duty to serve and protect those that cannot serve and protect themselves. So it's my position, in my opinion, and it always has been, in law enforcement or whatever profession you choose. It doesn't have to be law enforcement. It could be doctors, lawyers, nurses, whatever the case may be. If something is done wrong and they do something wrong, they should be held accountable for that. So in situations, but what people tend to forget and what's over-sensationalized in the media is that you can't pronounce guilt before guilt is proven. Even a police officer is innocent until proven guilty, just as a person in society would be. But in today's society, we rush sometimes to pronounce guilt on someone just based on something that we saw. So they have to have their ability to have a day in court to be where the evidence can be heard, where a jury can weigh that evidence and then come to a decision. But in that case, I think they found that the officers had overstepped their authority in doing what they did, and some were found guilty. But that needs to be proven just like any other case. But they do need to be held accountable for that.
And I think when things like that happen, then it's up to the agency to say, how did this happen? Did we not train our officers enough? Or did we need to do better so that this doesn't happen again?
Oke, untuk teman-teman online, silahkan ada yang mau bertanya secara langsung. Oke, siapa itu? Saya nggak ada nama. Yang saya lihat namanya sih hanya Steven. Tapi yang lainnya coba namanya. Oke, Anom, silakan Anom.
Hello, good morning everyone. So I'd like to address this question about ethics and law. So what I have gathered from the information is that ethics are the code of conduct for us to seek justice as a law practitioner. So my question is, as we all know, sometimes the lawmakers or the policies, written laws, they are most likely to be very slow in the updating of ethics, such as justice could be a very broad term. So what would happen if something is ethically correct to be ruled, but it is not written in the law, or the law says that it is actually wrong to say that it's actually correct? That's it. Thank you.
You could write questions for our bar exam. Those are the kinds of dilemmas we actually have as part of becoming a lawyer. There's a whole test that we have to take on ethics, and it kind of gives you no-win situation questions because that happens, which is why the law changes, because sometimes either something has been ignored or not thought of, or nobody ever did that bad thing before, and now we've got to deal with it. With regard to practicing law as an attorney and having a difference between what you think the right thing to do is and what the code of ethics is, I think every lawyer at some point in their career comes across that. And the way I handled it as a lawyer is I went to older, trusted lawyers and got advice on how can I reconcile what I think the right thing to do is versus what the ethics say I'm supposed to do here. And sometimes it was very tricky. And sometimes in Georgia, we have the ability to write to the state bar and ask for an advisory opinion where we can say, hey, the rules say I'm supposed to do this, but it seems like here's my situation and I don't think, if I do that, I don't think it will be right. And they may give an opinion that will modify what, to make allowances to make sure that at the end, justice is done and not the wrong thing. But it's a very tricky situation that every lawyer is going to come across.
I think the situation is here is almost the same. Oke, untuk yang chat, coba Pak Budi minta tolong. Untuk yang chat. Okay, my name is Natalia. I want to ask about the application of prosecutors' prosecutions in Indonesia and in the United States, where prosecution by the United States is divided into two prosecutions. Please explain. So basically, maybe Natalia wants to know more about the system of prosecutors.
Okay. It sounds like she was asking about the two different oaths that they have to take. One is just a general ethical oath for lawyers that they'll follow the general rules of, and a lot of the rules have to do with the money, you know, that you take a fee from a client and you've got to use it for that client and not use it for the wrong thing. And if you do that, if you don't handle your money correctly, you'll get in trouble really fast. That's not really so much a problem for prosecutors because we have one client, and the client is the government, and the government gives you a paycheck. Not maybe a big paycheck, but they give you a paycheck. And that's all. So, and that's your money, so it's not really a problem. But with prosecutors, we have a second oath that is to uphold the Constitution, the laws, and to protect the rights of the defendants. And we're not allowed to take any money other than the money that the government gives us. Police officers have that same thing in their oath. Police officers in America are not allowed to take any money from anybody other than the agency that pays them. And while that may not seem like a big deal in some cases, the problem is it's against the rules of both of our professions, and there's a law in Georgia called violation of oath of office, which is a crime. So not only could you get fired, but you could also get prosecuted. So prosecutors have that too. If I were caught taking money, I would not only get fired, I would go to jail. But I don't just have to represent my client as a prosecutor, I also have to protect the defendant.
Okay. Untuk yang di ruangan ini ada 2 pertanyaan ya, atau 3 ya. Sekali saja. Tadi yang di belakang, kemudian Anda yang pakai baju hitam dan Pak Faris. Oke, silakan. Apa enggak Bapak? Oke, sekedap. Oh. Mahasiswa dulu Pak Mardian dari tadi.
Okay, check. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So, my name is Let me introduce myself. My name is Muhammad Nopal Kurnia, and then I will.
Sebentar. Menyebutkan namanya jangan terlalu panjang,
Okay.
jangan terlalu cepat, jangan.
Okay.
Yang jelas namanya.
I'm so sorry. My name is Naufal.
Naufal, okay.
That's my name. So it's very simple question. I want just know how to handle sexual harassment in your country, because as we know, case of sexual harassment in Indonesian country are increased every year. So how does your country handle this case, like the legal basis or the handle process or something else? You can explain to me, and I thank you, Miss. That's it.
Sexual crimes, how you handle the sexual crimes.
Okay. Unfortunately, that is a problem in America. Sex trafficking is a huge problem. And the governor in our state has set up a task force that's made up of law enforcement officers and prosecutors, and also some of the people who set up like domestic violence shelters have helped and are now setting up shelters for victims of sex trafficking. And we've got we just passed a law 2 years ago that increases the penalty, the amount of time in jail for somebody who traffics, who engages in human trafficking. And outside the government, we also have many volunteer groups, nonprofit groups. One's called Out of Darkness, that helps mostly women, but there are young boys that are put into this. And so it's something that's just coming to light. I'm not going to say it's a new problem, but it's a newly recognized problem in America. And like I said, we're creating new laws and giving new services to help, and because the numbers are rather staggering worldwide of women, particularly, that are trafficked.
Jadi situasinya sama ya dengan Indonesia, dengan Amerika, meskipun hukumnya sudah bagus, tetap aja ada kasus seperti itu. Oke, silakan yang di belakang.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Ahmad. I have question for how about equal and democracy in the pure law and about law enforcement. Thank you.
Tentang apa?
Tentang equal and democracy.
Oke.
Equal. Yeah, equal.
Equality and democracy.
Yeah.
Okay. Di Amerika?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think about the equality and democracy situation in America?
What was it? I didn't understand.
How do you understand?
The equality and the democracy situation, yeah.
Well, there are always, challenges to that. Of course, there are laws in place where you can't be prejudiced because of people's gender, race, origin, and those kinds of things. There's federal law in place where there's protection for that. And it's also at the state, those laws pass on to both state and county level. So there's mechanism in place for that. Does that mean that things do not occur that aren't quite right? No, they do. And because there are human beings involved who may have some preconceived notions about how they view people. But you're always in tune to trying to recognize those situations and correct those situations. And a lot of times out of things that occur, both as you have appellate law and appeals court law, it generates more law. Just in law enforcement, if things happen, then it may generate more law and more policy to correct those situations. So it's a continuous process. I don't think you ever stop looking at that or making changes to that and tweaking that, because new things occur all the time in the continuum.
We have a saying in my religion that we live in a fallen world, meaning there is sin, and so there's always going to be people that are not doing the right thing. And part of that is bullying one person because you're a woman, so you're less, or you're this color or this religion or whatever. So it happens in America just like it happens here and everywhere else. I think in many ways it's getting better, but in many ways it's always going to be a problem. Our school, the university, our law school actually has, it's close, but has a little more women than men. And the law school I went to, the last 5 valedictorians have been women. So in terms of education and gender, we've come a long way. In terms of ethnic makeup, our universities are far more diverse than they were in my childhood.
And let me just add, the idea is not to look at a person's skin color or makeup in that way, but to look at a person's qualifications and a person's character, because that's what really matters the most in these things. Like in law enforcement, you have to have integrity, you have to have character, and you want to do those things, because if you don't have those things, then you're not trustworthy to do that job. And if you're not trustworthy, you can't do the job, because you can't go into court and testify to the truth, because nobody's going to believe you. So those are the things you look at when you look at the paper. Are you qualified, no matter what your race is? And if so, then you can get that job.
I think democracy helps bring about equality, maybe more so than other forms of government. But it's not perfect.
Oke, Ahmad ya, jadi masalahnya masih tetap aja sama, tapi ada beberapa hal yang misalnya di sekolah, di fakultas hukum beliau gitu, perempuannya sedikit, tapi malah justru perempuannya yang terpilih di posisi-posisi penting gitu. Nah, tapi kata Pak Russell bilang, kalau sebagai law enforcement, kalau tidak punya integritas, kalau tidak punya karakter, Anda gagal jadi itu gitu. Jadi harus punya karakter dan integritas gitu ya. Oke, selanjutnya mungkin ke Pak Faris, kemudian ke Pak Jaja.
Okay, thank you for section.
Bisa dibuka
question.
maskernya?
Thank you for section question and answer, Mr. and Miss Lewis. I'm sorry, maybe I will use Indonesian language for the questions. Yang pertama, mungkin Bu Leni bisa bantu. Yang pertama, apakah di Amerika itu pidana kerja sosial itu diterapkan atau tidak ke tindak pidana ringan saja atau bisa sampai ke tindak pidana yang berat? Mungkin contohnya white collar crime. Lalu jika memang pernah ada, mungkin di kasus apa? Kayak gitu. Lalu yang kedua, di Amerika itu seperti penjaranya itu apakah negara itu masih membiayai untuk penjaranya seperti makan, penjagaan, mungkin dan sebagainya, atau si terpidananya itu yang bayar, seperti contohnya mungkin di Belanda, kayak gitu sih. Mungkin segitu saja dari saya. Terima kasih and thank you, Mr. and Mr.
Okay, the first question she was asking about the social service. Does it only belong to the misdemeanor cases, or let's say the judge gives the sentence that you work as a social service in many hours, or you also can apply it to the white collar crimes? That's the first question. And the second one is speaking about the prison. Does the state funded the prison, or the one inside, or the inmates funded themselves?
Good questions. With regard to the prisons, the state funds the prisons, but the prisoners can work inside the prison, mainly to get privileges and money on their, they can have an account, like family members can put money where they can buy snacks and cigarettes and books or whatever at the little store that's in the prison. So they can work in the prison, but the prison itself is paid for by the government. And I forgot the first question. Oh, yes. We call it community service. It's up to each individual judge to decide whether he wants to allow community service. In my court, there are many defendants who are poor, and so ordinarily they would get a fine of so much money that they would never be able to pay because they have no money. So I let them do community service to work off the fine rather than having to pay money that they will never ever have.
Can it also apply to the white collar crimes?
Oh, sorry. That would be up to the judge.
Okay.
Now, we also have something called restitution, which doesn't come to the government, but if somebody steals money from you, I can order them to pay restitution where they pay you back that money. They can't do social service for that because it's money they owe to you.
Okay. Jadi tergantung hakimnya kalau untuk tadi ya pekerja sosial itu. Biasanya kalau untuk kasus-kasus di mana terdakwanya itu miskin dan putusannya itu denda, jadi mereka harus bekerja secara sosial untuk mengganti denda tersebut. Nah, khusus untuk kasus-kasus white collar crimes itu juga tergantung hakimnya. Ada hakim yang memang memutuskan itu, ada hakim yang memang memutuskan untuk penjaraan. Kemudian untuk penjara sendiri, negara membiayai penjara, tapi di dalamnya para narapidana atau warga binaan itu bisa bekerja di dalam penjara. Gitu. Jadi mereka bisa menabung gitu, misalnya di dalam penjara ada kantin atau apa, bisa membeli sesuatu dari hasil mereka bekerja. Misalnya contohnya jadi tukang cuci misalnya gitu, atau memberikan makanan gitu dan lain sebagainya. Apakah sudah cukup jelas? Silakan, mangga untuk Pak Jaja.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Mohon maaf bolak-balik karena ada kegiatan lain. Saya sedang menyusun program pendidikan profesi advokat. Nah, saya ingin sharing dengan terutama di negara bagian Georgia atau pada umumnya di Amerika. Nah, kalau yang sekarang sedang didiskusikan dan Kementerian Pendidikan Indonesia di Indonesia itu ada dua pola. Pertama, polanya itu adalah ada pendidikan di kampus selama 2 semester, kemudian magang 2 tahun yang dilaksanakan oleh profesi advokat. Kemudian pola yang kedua, yang kebetulan itu yang saya mengusulkan adalah pendidikan selama 2 tahun, tetapi polanya itu teori praktek selama 2 tahun. Nah, saya ingin sharing itu yang pertama. Yang kedua, saya pernah berkunjung ke ke Mahkamah Agung Federal, masuk ke dalamnya, lihat perpustakaan, lihat ruang sidang dan lain sebagainya. Very good. Jauh banget dengan di Indonesia. Nah, tetapi ketika dialog saya semacam, kalau di Indonesia itu semacam sekretaris jenderalnya, ternyata dari pengadilan federal itu jumlah perkara itu lebih banyak daripada di Indonesia. Kurang lebih 21 jutaan lah gitu per tahun. Kemudian di pengadilan negara bagian itu kurang lebih 61 juta. Mungkin saya salah baca, tapi inti pertanyaannya dari jumlah perkara yang lebih banyak daripada di Indonesia kurang lebih 10%-nya lah daripada itu. Itu penyelesaian perkara bisa diselesaikan dengan tepat waktu. Nah, pertanyaan juga kenapa bisa begitu gitu kan? Atau ada semacam guideline yang itu bisa menjadi komparatif untuk di Indonesia. Itu yang kedua. Yang ketiga tadi yang disampaikan oleh Ibu siapa itu?
Ibu Cheryl.
Ada persoalan integriti ya. Di sana integritinya sangat cukup clear, tetapi sekarang kalau tidak salah kalau saya baca di berbagai media ada problem sekarang itu di Amerika katanya. Kalau dulu orang berlomba-lomba ingin menjadi advokat, alumni fakultas hukum di Amerika itu ingin jadi advokat karena dari sisi pendapatannya besar. Kemudian ada pola semacam guidance bagi advokat-advokat junior oleh seniornya. Tetapi sekarang advokat-advokat senior itu terutama dalam masa pandemi kemarin itu membuka layanan gratis dengan pola online yang mengakibatkan pola-pola itu yang tadinya digarap oleh advokat-advokat junior itu advokat-advokat junior itu agak lama untuk bisa mandirinya menjadi advokat yang setara dengan seniornya, sehingga para orang tua itu memprotes tentang keadaan itu di perguruan tinggi yang menyelenggarakan pendidikan hukumnya. 3 hal itu, Bu Leni. Kalau saya mau pakai bahasa Inggris takut nggak nyampe.
Okay, so the first of all, he explained about the Ministry of Education. They have like new program as for law students after they graduated from law school. They must to follow these 2 semesters and the internship for 2 years. That's the first option. And the second option is the law school graduates must follow the like a course for 2 years in terms to get the permission to be a lawyer. So it's just like for information. And the question, he went to the state and then he went to the Supreme Court of Federal, and then he found that your case compared with ours, a lot of case in your country than ours. And it's approximately about 61 million cases, that's what he said. While in Indonesia, only 10% of it. But speaking about how to finish the case, in your country, it could be on time, and then there's a lot of guidance. And how come you handle a lot of cases but still work on track, while in Indonesia we're having difficulties about that? That's the first question. And the second question is speaking about the integrity. In the state, there's so many people want to be a lawyer because they have a lot of money for lawyers. But not only that, usually in different law firms, the senior will guide the junior lawyers how to handle the case and everything. But now the situation is quite different. To the online and everything, it seems like the space for junior is quite limited. Is that correct, or he needs explanation about that?
Sorry, before you answer, I would like to introduce Pak Jaja. Pak Jaja was the head of Indonesian Judicial Commission. Yes.
You met him at the lectures room before.
Yes.
We met him earlier.
Yeah, okay.
With a lot of this case, how you manage the case, on time? Yeah.
Okay. Well, COVID had a huge impact on our caseload because for 13 months we had no trials. And so all of the cases that were ready for trial just sat there until our courts opened back up. But in the meantime, people were still filing more cases. So that's a problem in America right now. One of the ways that we have helped streamline to get caught up is by using Zoom for...
Like e-court?
Yeah, like, electronic court for the preliminary stuff, motion hearings, and things like that. We're doing electronically because that way a lawyer can be in 5 different courtrooms in one day. Whereas before they had to travel all around the state, and so maybe they could only do 1 or 2. So it was something we did out of necessity with COVID, but it has turned out to be a blessing. Like, oh, we can handle a lot more business now because the lawyers don't have to come here. They can stay where they're at, and I can handle many hearings in a day because you don't have the time it takes for this lawyer to pick all his stuff up out of the courtroom and the other lawyer to bring all his stuff in. You just bloop, new screen, and there you go. So that's helped. My caseload is reasonably well caught up. I was fortunate in that our courthouse is an old building that has big rooms with tall ceilings. So we were able to spread people apart. So we were able to bring juries in faster than some of my colleagues that have brand new courthouses where the rooms are smaller. So they still are having trouble bringing juries in and having trials because they can't keep people far enough apart. But we were able to start, we were one of the first in the state to be able to resume jury trials. So we were very fortunate in that regard. But you just, there's an old saying that says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's like, we're just taking one bite at a time. That's all we can do. And then the second question?
About the senior, junior lawyers.
Okay. Actually, that is where the remote has been a problem, because with many of the big law firms in Atlanta, Atlanta's our capital city, where their offices were very smushed, compact, they're slow to come back together, and so those lawyers aren't getting the FaceTime, we call it FaceTime, with their mentors. But the State Bar of Georgia, one of the requirements that they did probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, is every new lawyer must have a mentor. And I used to serve as a mentor for new lawyers, where they had to, as they were learning things and working on things, and their mentor had to sign off on what they were doing. And they couldn't do it unsupervised until their mentor said, "You're ready." So.
For how long, the mentor?
The mentor for at least a year.
A year, okay.
So even if they were brilliant, they had to be under a mentor for a year, but even longer if the mentor felt like they needed more time.
Okay. Bapak, untuk yang pertama itu mereka ada sistem begitu ya. Nah, khusus untuk pada saat COVID 13 bulan itu tidak ada persidangan begitu. Nah, tapi yang ada hanya tahapan-tahapan awal saja begitu ya. Misalnya hearing dan lain sebagainya. Nah, kemudian tapi kasus tetap harus berjalan begitu. Cuman caranya adalah dengan dilakukannya e-court gitu. Nah, terus kemudian yang kedua untuk pengacara senior dan junior, pengacara junior tidak boleh dilepaskan begitu saja sebelum ada izin dari pengacara seniornya. Jadi kalau dari pengacara seniornya ini belum layak nih untuk persidangan, itu harus didampingi oleh mentornya. Biasanya 1 tahun, tapi kalau misalnya oleh seniornya dianggap ini 1 tahun masih kurang nih gitu, mereka akan tetap didampingi. Mereka akan dilepaskan sepanjang seniornya sudah yakin bahwa pengacara junior ini bisa menghandle kasus gitu ya. Oke, apakah sudah cukup jelas, Pak? Is there any short course for the lawyers before they took an oath?
An ethics course?
Course.
Yes. Yes, every law school teaches ethics, and then there's a test called the MPRE, the Multi-State Practice Responsibility and Ethics.
That's a part of the curriculum.
That's
at
well,
the faculty.
but the test, you have to pass that test before you can be sworn in as a lawyer, and it's all about ethics.
Oke. Ada Pak, tapi itu bagian dari kurikulum di fakultas, begitu. Oke, teman-teman, mungkin ini sudah azan, sudah saatnya mau makan siang mungkin ya. Terima kasih untuk teman-teman yang di online dan teman-teman yang ada di sini. Mudah-mudahan ilmu kita hari ini bermanfaat. Mudah-mudahan informasi yang diberikan oleh Judge Cheryl dan Pak Russell itu bermanfaat untuk teman-teman semua. Mohon maaf kalau saya belum bisa mengakomodir semua pertanyaan, dan saya mohon maaf jika ada pertanyaan atau kata-kata yang kurang berkenan di hati Anda semua. Tolong kasih tepukan yang sangat meriah kepada tamu kita. So, thank you so much, Judge Russell and Pak Russell.
I just wanted to say we do have a small gift here for everyone that we're going to pass out.
Ada hadiah nih, oleh-oleh dari Amerika. Ini sama Pak Jason. Ini tempelan kulkas. Nanti disimpan di meja saja, nanti biar ambil sesuai dengan kebutuhan ya. Oke, mungkin saya serahkan kepada MC, silakan.
Alright, everyone, back to me again. And thank you to the speakers for the information and knowledge which have been given to us, and so made be so much useful for us long lifetime. Okay, and also thank you to Miss Lenny for moderating the discussion very, very well. Yeah. Okay, move to the next one. There will be souvenirs giving and photo session. To Miss Nia and Miss Hasti, please come forward. Okay, I'm sorry. To Mr. Nur Hassan and Miss Nia, please come forward. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, finally we get into the last session in this event, that is closing. So let's close this general lecture by saying Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. As the master of ceremony, I would like to appreciate all of the participants here, and especially the speakers for attending this event today. And also I'd like to apologize if there are mistakes from me during this session. Well, I'm Falda Zahira Sidki, and that's all for me. Have a great rest of your day, and until next time, see you again in another chance. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Ibu dan Bapak, teman-teman, mari kita foto bersama ya. Let's take pictures together. So, for our memories. Teman-teman mahasiswa boleh minta tolong mejanya digeser nggak?
Yeah, everyone please come forward to take a photo. Don't be shy. Let's go, let's go. To participant in Zoom, please show your best smile.